The Supreme Court has upheld President Trump's travel ban. This is against Muslim-majority countries, but the question is, should we be concerned that this is racist or anti-Muslim, or is this really just specific policy against specific countries? Let's try once again. Vinu, are you there?
I'm here.
There you are.
There he is.
Beautiful. Thank you for joining us. So help us understand what is at issue with this Supreme Court ruling.
Basically, it comes down to the majority saying that President Trump has the authority to issue this proclamation, if it's because it's within the scope of his authority as president. And basically, the majority ignored all the comments that he had made previous to this, which is what Justice Sotomayor talked about.
Keep going. So they ignored him, and
so basically, what the court said is that it's more important for them to look at the scope of the president's authority. So, in other words, does the president have the power to do this?
So that's what they were deciding.
They argued yes. They argued yes.
Yeah.
Not the soundness of the policy.
Right. As always, they just are they're there to make a decision on the constitutionality of the ruling, right? Is this constitutionally protected or not? Can a president do this or not? That's the question they're answering, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and the five of the 9 justices, 4 decisions said that the president does have the authority to do this. One of the most important things that came out of this, though, is regardless of your view of whether he does or whether you agree with the dissent, is that the court explicitly, for the very first time, overruled the Korematsu decision.
What is that?
Basically said that the Korematsu decision is a Supreme Court decision from the 1940s that upheld the right of the president at the time to put United States citizens into concentration camps, specifically the Japanese. Right. So Chief Justice Roberts wrote some incredibly strong words today in overruling it. He said that the forcible relocation of U.S. citizens to concentration camps solely and explicitly on the basis of race is objectively unlawful and outside the scope of presidential authority. Sotomayor had said that this is a similar, allowing this travel ban to go forward is similar to the decision in Korematsu, but Justice Roberts said, no, Korematsu is no longer good law, has been overruled by history, and it's not the point, is what he argued. So the president just simply has the authority.
So I want to make sure I get the historical sort of note here, which is that the Korematsu decision is what allowed President Roosevelt to put Japanese in concentration camps, right? That's correct?
Well, it was a decision that upheld it.
Okay.
Right? So there was a series of Japanese that had gone to jail.
Yeah, no, I get it. And now, right. And now this is the first time this is stunning to me, the Supreme Court has never overturned that. And now they're specifically overturning it. And in overturning it, they're also using that logic against the defense on this case.
Right. The dissent cited it and saying that that there are parallels between this and the Korematsu case. And basically, Justice Sotomayor goes into great detail, outlining that. Justice Roberts basically has one paragraph that says Korematsu is not good law, was really overruled by history. If it hadn't been overruled by history, we're overruling it today. Yeah. But that doesn't have anything to do with today's decision.
So I'm wondering what the dissent's logic was in terms of associating foreign nationals with U.S. citizens. How does that logic play out?
Well, they're saying the reason was, at the time of Korematsu, really, is that there was no evidence of a Japanese-American threat to the country. And that basically, as it turned out, from a historical perspective, the government, part of the reason that this was upheld was that the government cited things that were actually patently untrue. And this came out in the 80s, that the government had withheld information that there was no evidence of a Japanese-American threat. So Korematsu actually had its conviction vacated, meaning the effect of it was removed. And so that was in the 80s, and that was in district court in Northern California. But what they're saying, what Sotomayor was saying, is at the same basis here. Like, there is no evidence that these citizens from these countries have posed any threats. I mean, the attack on U.S. soil, 9/11, well, these guys were Saudis, and Saudi Arabia is not on this list. And so that's the whole, so when you take that, what Sotomayor is saying, is you take that combined with President Trump's clear anti-Muslim bias, right? We want to make sure no Muslims come into this country, and everything he said during the campaign, and even after the first ban, he announced it as a Muslim ban. The first,
that was the first name for it. Yeah.
Right. Now why?
Right, he called it a Muslim ban.
But let me ask you this: in the 15 months that this has been working its way through the court system, what has been our policy? We've been letting them in because remember there were all those protests at the airports and people on our borders and all of our main ports said we don't know what to do now. Are we letting them in? Are we not letting them in? Are we holding them? What are we doing? What's been going on in the last 15 months?
So the first two versions were basically, the first version was basically knocked out. And so, this is when Trump said we're trying to find a way to make this work. Basically, the answer is actually for several months now, the ban has been in effect. So when this case was up for oral argument, the Supreme Court allowed it to go into effect months and months ago. So the answer is they've actually been banning people from these 6 countries.
They have.
But they've not.
Yeah, they have.
But hang on. They've not been banning Muslims. 92% of the Muslim world can enjoy United States soil as they wish. It's just those particular countries have had some restrictions.
Right, and they happen to be highly Muslim-populated countries.
And
right.
again, Trump with his rhetoric is making everyone insane, having called it a Muslim ban. But the reality is there has been no Muslim ban.
The other reality is
1.2 billion Muslims can come and go as they please.
The other reality is the only terrorist attacks we've seen are from American national white men.
People just can't come.
What?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, people just can't come to this country. I'm sorry to interrupt.
You can't travel to this country? You can't travel to this country if you're from Indonesia?
You have to get a visa, right? You don't have open borders.
So we're denying that.
I understand. You land in the United States, you walk past the same border guy I walk past when I go to Indonesia, and he stamps your passport, and you come in. There's no restriction.
Right. You have to get a visa. You can't just come in. Like, no one can just come in. It's not saying that everybody who wants to come here can come in.
Wait a minute.
You still have to get a visa.
Wait a minute. When I go to Indonesia...
From Brazil, you have to get a visa.
Certain countries, you do have to get a visa.
But if I go
Most countries.
What?
Most countries, you need
Most countries, the United States does not allow...
We don't allow people
unlimited travel.
I understand. I understand. Have you ever gone to Australia? You know what you have to go, the paperwork you have to go to Australia. It's a pain in the ass. But you just go. You're not restricted from... Yeah. You're not restricted from going. You can go any more than somebody from a Muslim from Indonesia is restricted in coming here. I mean, there's
But then why are you saying that the people from Indonesia would not get approved for a visa?
No, I'm not saying that. But I was just saying back to when you say that 92% of the world's Muslims come here. I don't think that's accurate. I'm just saying what part of what the
what's inaccurate about that? I want to get really clear. What is inaccurate about that? They get their visa, they come.
Anybody who wants to come here just can't come here. There's a whole travel visa.
Right, I understand the same process I go through when I go to wherever. It's the same process, but it's not as though if I'm not from Yemen, I'm going to trigger a flag just because I'm Muslim.
Well, it also doesn't mean that you're just going to. Not everyone who applies for.
I understand. I understand not everybody, but it's not going to be because I'm Muslim. That's the point. It's not a Muslim ban from other countries, except those countries that are in this upheld in this thing. And the problem is he called it a Muslim ban, and that's sick. Frankly, that's what's disturbing about the whole thing, right? I mean,
and the court also agreed today. They also raised in essence kind of your point, which said that this only affects 8% of the world's Muslims.
Right.
So that was an argument in against calling it or labeling it a Muslim ban.
Right. I mean, the rhetoric is we're driving each other nuts with our rhetoric. I mean, Maxine, no, really. I mean, it's just so disturbing. But go ahead, finish your thought. So, did you see anything? I'm curious if you saw anything in the dissent that was impressive, that really caught your attention in terms of the logic they were using, the dissent logic, and that should have been sort of. I don't see any of it in the headlines right now. I'm just wondering if there's anything there that was really impressive.
Well, one of the things Justice Sotomayor did was she read her dissent. Right, she read it out loud, which doesn't happen. It doesn't happen very often. And she actually read the President Trump's statement that called for a total and complete ban on Muslims entering the United States. And, she said, let the gravity of those statements sink in. Most of these words were spoken or written by the current president of the United States. She, the whole issue, and she raised, and her dissent, I read it, and it's, I can't disagree with Justice Roberts that, if the president puts forth a race-neutral reason or a religious-neutral reason for doing this, he has the authority to do that.
Right.
So to Mayor's point, I don't think really argues that whether he has the authority. It's a question of whether this president, based on what he said, is doing it for the right reason. Right? And the issue is whether this actually affects national security. I mean, there are many people who've said that this actually hurts national security because you're giving all the people that are anti-U.S. another thing to latch onto, saying they hate Muslims and bringing the world into conflict with the Muslim world.
Giving them more ideology to hit.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting, though? But isn't it interesting, Mr. Varghese, that isn't those two opinions are sort of the differing sort of sense of what should be happening from the bench? In other words, one is a narrow constitutional interpretation, and the other is a political interpretation from the bench. A historical, political argument why the bench should have the right to do something different than narrowly interpret the Constitution, right?
Well, but this is I disagree. What I'm saying is, like, even Justice Roberts, by taking those statements, which are wonderful words, saying that Korematsu is, cannot be, it's outside the scope of presidential authority. People were citing Korematsu as a basis for upholding this travel ban.
Crazy.
Saying that, and that people were. There were people arguing that Korematsu is still good law. And so Roberts, basically put an end to that. However, in Korematsu, the questions of whether Japanese posed a threat was at the heart of the dissents in those cases. And basically, one of the dissenters I've been involved in these historical reenactments here in New York with the bar associations. And one of the most powerful dissents is saying that, hey, we're the United States. What are we saying to the rest of the world? That was in Korematsu. And Justice Kennedy today basically had to direct a message in a concurring opinion while he agreed with the majority, basically gave a message to President Trump that says, your words are important, and it's important that you follow the Constitution. It's a very interesting concurrence, and I think...
Very, very. So he sort of gave with one hand and pulled out with the other. Vinu, I got to wrap it up. Can you tell us the website or where people can contact you if they like your services?
It's VargheseLaw.com, VargheselaW.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vinu Varghese, attorney.